Today's episode is so dynamic and juicy. Today we have Amanda Blair, who I've been following for 8-10 years. She's been a dating and relationship coach. She has now evolved into being a couples therapist. And so this conversation today is all about her journey with going from dating and relationship coaching to becoming a couples therapist and what she had to navigate to do that. And also about her own relationship and how she had to work through some really hard things and hard conversations, and how her relationship today has led her to be married. So I just think she has a really fresh, interesting take on the dating conversation. What did you think?
I totally agree. As I've mentioned before, I didn't even know dating coaches were even really a thing. Like, they're actually much more common than I realized since I haven't been dating for so long. So it's been
But
really...
I feel like you needed one.
Oh, girl. I could have hardcore used a dating coach.
Okay, so this is maybe why dating coaches have become a thing in the last 10 years, Jane Thatcher Hahn, because your way of picking up your husband was to go to him. He was playing music, right?
He was running an open mic and I played the open mic.
And you asked him to come play music for you for free.
We did.
And he said, I don't work for free.
And then, as you can imagine, it didn't work out at that moment. It wasn't until 2 years later I saw him on OkCupid, which was very cool a decade ago. And I was like, I think I know you. Yeah.
I'm one that solicited you for free work.
I tried to get you to work for free. Remember that?
Oh my God, I love it.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
All jokes aside, yes. And I think you make a really great point on this episode, which is this topic is a little edgy for us just because I think, we both have named, and we name on this episode, that it feels like the dating content and dating coach demographic is the middle, high wealth white woman, right? And the question is, like, do men use dating coaches? Do queer folks need dating coaches?
I also think therapists tend to have strong feelings about coaches. Ask any of your therapist friends about it, because therapists get a lot of education and tend to think that they know what they're doing in a different way. Coaching is unregulated. And so anybody can be a coach, right? So we kind of talk through that and talk with Amanda about why she decided to become a therapist and some of the issues therein. Yeah.
Which is why, I'm a fangirl of Amanda's, but everything you said, I think Amanda takes into account, right? Like,
definitely.
She talked a lot about like oppression and how, her own process of kind of sharing tips and things throughout time. And she's come to uncover it from a different place. So I think it's really cool and brave and vulnerable of her to talk about that. And also, you see a lot of therapists go to coaches, but you don't see a lot of coaches going to therapists.
Yeah.
So her exploration around that and what she really was interested in, the research and the science and kind of the hard facts. So she has just such a great, interesting take on where this all intersects. And I love, love, love this conversation. Welcome to Are We Happy Yet? I'm Hannah Buzzo, licensed therapist.
And I'm Jane Thatcher Hahn, licensed clinical social worker.
We're two longtime friends deep in the work of helping people untangle their lives.
And let's be honest, untangling our own along the way.
We started this podcast because even as mental health goes mainstream, more and more people are feeling anxious, disconnected, and burnt out than ever before.
So what gives? We're exploring how everything from therapy and psychedelics to culture, politics, creativity, and relationships shape our well-being.
Think of this as your weekly reality check, gut punch, and group hug all rolled into one.
We're here to ask the big questions, share what we're learning, and laugh a lot while we figure it out.
This is Are We Happy Yet? Let's get into it. Well, welcome back to the Are We Happy Yet podcast. And I am so excited for this conversation. I know it's going to be a really juicy and fun one. Jane and I have been exploring relationships a lot on the podcast, and we're just talking about how we have seen in our personal lives with friends and in our professional lives with clients. There's some questions we had about the dating world. We are just seeing our clients talk a lot about specific rules that they have for dating and really struggling with dating. And so we were like, who can we talk to all about dating and relationships? And I was like, the best person is Amanda Blair. And she said yes to join us, which I'm jazzed about. So I'm happy to have Amanda Blair here on the podcast with us. She's a couples therapist and has lots of experience working with people around dating and relationships, couples from everything from substance use to high conflict couples. So she is the best person that we can talk to all things dating and relationships. So thanks so much, Amanda, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
You just want to jump in and tell us a little bit about what got you interested in working with dating and relationships and couples therapy and just kind of start kicking us off there.
I think my interest in relationships has been from the beginning. Like I remember being like a kid and like talking to my babysitters about their relationships and like trying to like understand the dynamics that they were going through. So, and I think that's because I come from really young parents who, you know, I was born in the 80s. I grew up in like the 90s. So they were young, they were uninformed, they were traumatized by their childhoods. They had no idea what they were doing. And so my life was a lot of chaos and a lot of trauma because of that. And I watched each of my parents just kind of like cycle through the relationships we do in our 20s, right? Like really toxic relationships. And so I think because I had sort of that front row view to like just every shade of dysfunctional relationship, it made me interested in understanding them. And then obviously because I come from that background, as I got into, you know, being in relationships myself, which I was also interested in very early on. I have a lot of, or I should say, I had a lot of daddy issues. I had a very unavailable dad, very inconsistent with me, created a very anxious attachment. And so I was boy obsessed from the get and like always wanted, you know, a boyfriend, was always like chasing boys. So I was in a lot of dysfunctional patterns and suffering. And I was so miserable through that. And I wanted to understand, because I just generally like talking about that the most. I was always the friend that was like, yeah, like, give me the deets. Let's go through it. Like giving advice to my friends. And also for myself, because I wanted to have a relationship that felt fulfilling and safe and secure and loving. And I just didn't know how to get there. I didn't know if I could do it. And that's like where my interest comes from. And then, you know, that just kind of led me along this path that like eventually landed me here where I'm now a therapist. But before I was a therapist, I was like a relationship coach, but for like dating women that were dating, mostly working with women. I think I worked with like a couple men, but mostly women. And I was just really interested in attachment theory because that helped me heal the most and really helped me understand relationships in a new way and like why I was doing what I was doing, that I wasn't crazy, that, you know, clients I were working with weren't crazy and, you know, not all men were terrible. Like it just really helped me break down a lot of these stereotypes and a lot of these like tropes that we kind of put people into and help me understand myself, other people, and like what they're going through and how that shows up. And, you know, also I dated in New York for 12 years. New York is a tough place for that. And so there was like such a rich board to play in and see things. So yeah, kind of led me here.
So it sounds like attachment theory was a big help for you in understanding and moving past some of those patterns. What were the other things that helped you move along? Because I think Hannah and I can both speak to, in our practice, we have people who never, ever break those patterns of dating and romance and love, you know?
Yeah. I think that, you know, it was a lot of therapy. A lot of therapy really helped me, and really understanding the attachment stuff, which sort of led me to more internal family systems, inner child work. And I think that combination is like what kind of got me to a place where before I met my husband, I was like, I'm leaning way more secure than I ever had. You know, because they say technically research, you have to be in a securely attached relationship for like 7 years or something to really be like, I've changed my attachment style. But I felt like I had done enough work to really be leaning a new way, which I felt like when I met my husband was like really mirrored to me. It was like, wow, this is like a different ball game. I'm showing up so differently. The way he's showing up is so different than what I've experienced before. So it was really like, okay, yeah, all that work that I've done, I'm seeing that now. So I think it was a combination of those things, but it took a long time. Like it took so much time. Yeah. It took so much repetition of my patterns and watching myself repeat the pattern over and over and over and over and over and over and over again and be like, what the fuck? For me to really be able to like get there. I like to say like the step one of like becoming aware, and then to like step two where you're like aware and watching what you're doing is like very small, but step 2 to step 3 of like, I'm watching, I'm doing, and now I'm changing is like the biggest gap. And it's the hardest place to be because you're like, why am I still doing it? You know, and it can get really frustrating. And I really had to like fall in love with myself. That was like number one, right? Because I really feel like relationships sort of mirror how we feel about ourselves. So like that's like instant feedback, right? And I really had to show up for me and like accept myself, love myself, validate myself, which was all of that inner child work. So I could really, my secure base was me, you know, first and foremost. And that really was when things really started to change for me.
And that's like why I wanted to talk to you specifically, because I'm an attachment-based therapist and I work with a lot of couples. And I mean, I truly am of the mind that like healing the attachment system and doing all the work that you're saying is like the only way to really the only way. And like the science says that. But then when I go to brunch with girlfriends or when I talk to clients and they're like, well, you know, this podcast said, you know, you can only go on a date with a guy on a Monday night, or you can't have sex with a guy until after 6 dates, or it's better to lean back. I'm like, okay, I'm steeped in relationships and science and research that is like not based on any rules. So I guess my question is, if the goal is to have these long-term secure relationships, why do we have so much shit around rules and expectations and how to do it? To me is like the opposite of healthy attachment.
You're so correct. And when I was a relationship coach, you know, sort of like at the beginning, definitely not at the end, but like at the beginning, I was really steeped in those rules myself because I had been taught that. And that's how I'd been taught to coach, is like coach those rules. And so like I was definitely someone who was like perpetuating those things, which like, I'm so sorry. And those weren't helping me. I was trying to do it and like I couldn't, right? Like that is really difficult. And here's why. Because that is not being authentic. That is trying to get it right. That's trying to get to a destination. That's saying when X happens, then I'll be good, which is putting your sense of safety, your sense of worth of like, I'm a worthy person on this destination of a relationship that'll never get you anywhere, right? There's never a destination. It's the journey. That's the point. And so you have to pull all of that in. You have to go, I need to understand that I am worthy and lovable here as I am sitting and doing nothing, right? Like what I always used to talk about with clients was like, if you are sitting on a bump on a log for the next 100 years, like your worth and being lovable doesn't change. Like you can't add to it. You can't remove from it. You don't have to do more. You don't have to do less. It's just you. So until we can really live from that place of like, I'm good and I'm acceptable and I'm not too much, or I'm not the thing, whatever the stories we have, that's when we can like really, I think, start healing the attachment wounds and get into something more secure. But the rules are about getting the destination.
Yeah.
Right. It's like just checking the box. It's like, check this box. Okay, cool. So it's not really tuned in. It's not really like, you know, you're not there authentically. So you're not going to meet someone authentic either. Right. Like you guys are kind of just trying to get this internal need met. So that for me is what I sort of analyzed about myself and where I think those rules are coming from. And it's fear. I think it's a lot of fear-based. Something that I was taught was the 6-week rule. Like, oh, you can't have sex for 6 weeks. And then if you do, and it's like, that doesn't matter. That doesn't fucking matter at all. Like that, there's no basis of that. You have to understand your relationship to sex. You have to understand how you feel about it. And you have to understand what feels good for you and what doesn't, and what is going to activate you and what won't. And like, you have to accept that and be good with it, which there's some exploration in there, but like, and then you have to be willing to be open about that. Of like, yeah, if we're not exclusive, I don't want to sleep with you because that will just make me miserable. So I'm not gonna. Or like, yeah, actually, you know what? You're hot and I would feel okay sleeping with you if I never heard from you tomorrow. Great. Have fun. But it's really you have to really understand yourself. And I think it's easier to prescribe to rules than it is to understand yourself 100%. And then be honest with other people about who you are. Right. Totally. When I met my husband, I was like, listen, I got no time for anything that isn't exactly what I fucking want. So if you're not there, bye. My life is so good. I'm so fulfilled. So I was really like, here's what I'm looking for. And that's it. I'm not going to play. Like, I just don't have time for it. And that energy was really clear. So he showed up very clear, right?
Which I think I could go the other way too. I mean, and I don't know if you've seen this, but sometimes with clients, like, I think what you're saying is brilliant and they really truly want a relationship so bad, like that, a partnership, a relationship, but they're not having those honest conversations and kind of acting like they're okay with casual or just hanging out, which there's nothing wrong with casual and just hanging out. But I think what you're saying and what I've seen is when it's not authentic to you, that's when it gets a little dicey, right?
Yeah. And here's the thing is like, you know, I came from like, I feel like there's a scale of like the attachments, right? The styles. Like, I think someone can be more avoidant than someone else and still be avoidant. For me, I was like on an extreme end of the anxious. Like, I was like, I look back on some of the things I'm like, oh my God. Cringe. But with that, I could still be in something casual if like everything was above board, right? If I was like genuinely like, I think this person's hot and I would love to sleep with them, but I don't actually like them enough for a relationship. They like bother me about this or this or this. And if that was like true, no problem. And they were like, yeah, same. And I'll be honest and like upfront with you. And I'm not going to be like a dick. I was like, great, cool. We're good. It was when that wasn't happening. I wasn't being true to myself. Cause there's some people that it was like, no, I like genuinely really like you. And like, I want you to like me and I want you to be in a relationship with me. And if I tried to pretend that that wasn't the case because they didn't want that, then yeah, I was fucking miserable. And I was like so activated and I was so anxious and just like going off. So it's not even like if you run more anxious that you can't be casual with someone, but like you have to be honest. You have to understand yourself so that you know when that is something that you can do and when it's something you cannot do. And there is a huge difference. And that just is. And when you can know that, then you can have like a casual experience and it can feel really successful.
Yeah.
And then when you know that you can't, then you're like, hey, I gotta walk away. And that is really difficult. But it's when you can understand that about yourself and you love yourself enough, then you're like, love yourself enough. That's a hard term. But when you're able to like really give yourself that sense of love and acceptance and validation, I feel like you can like feel those feelings of like, this is so disappointing. But I also know that this isn't a reflection on my sense of being lovable or that I can be in a relationship or that someone's attracted to me or like whatever the like little wound is. This is just, this isn't for me. And I'm really disappointed about that. Right. And like being honest. I think that's so important.
You know, it's interesting hearing you say all of this, and I don't know how this shows up in your practices, but I get a lot of kickback about you have inherent worth. And if you're a bump on a log for the next 100 years, you still deserve. That is something that my clients fight with me on, that they want to believe, that they don't believe, that they don't believe it for other people. So it's really interesting because I personally, and I will tell my clients this is a personal belief, full disclosure, like I truly believe that like you don't have to earn worth. You don't have to earn lovability. You don't have to earn those things, which doesn't mean that you don't make mistakes or that you don't, that there's not consequences for things. I'm curious if you guys have that same resistance from your clients.
For sure. I think less when I was coaching because I was like coaching in more like a spiritually minded community. Like that's like where like came up in. And so that was kind of like, yeah, we can like get there. I would say that my clients now in therapy, they're not coming from that world. So like, yeah, they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? And so, yeah, a lot more pushback on that, which I think that reflects in the state of our world.
Yes.
You know, like you see that. I think for me personally, what I really loved about my internship site, because I work in an intensive outpatient center at a nonprofit. And so I'm working with people dealing with like pretty severe substance abuse. And I think, you know, coming into that practice, I was like, I'm not judgmental. I'm a recovering alcoholic. Like I've been sober for 8 years, you know, like I have experience with that. But there was still part of me that was like, yeah, but I'm like not a drug addict. So no. And like, you know, living in New York, now living in Portland, there's a large community that, you know, is unhoused because of drug use. And now working within that community, my sense of humanity has grown so much. And my judgment has gone down so far because I'm like, yeah, when you sit across from a person and you're like, I hear your story. I get why you've made the choices you've made. How could you have made any other choices?
Yeah.
This is the only path that was laid out for you. And you forget the privilege of like, I was given other choices in my life and not everyone has those. Like I was given other models to look at and go, okay, I can do that. That's something different. Where a lot of people, like the only people they're surrounded with are deeply traumatized individuals who have never gotten a chance to look or heal that. They don't have resources for that. They're on the poverty line. So they're worried about putting food on their table. They're worried about keeping rent, making rent and having a roof over their head. They don't have time to look at that stuff. And so they're perpetuating that. And it's like, then yeah, I get why we're here. This makes perfect sense. So my heart has like grown so much for humanity, and that, which is like not what I was anticipating. I guess like, it's not that I didn't think that would happen. I just wasn't anticipating it to happen. So like, whoa, my heart is growing. That has been really cool. But also I'm like, yeah, we just as a society need to know that we're all worthy of love and care and consideration. And that doesn't mean we're not going to be held accountable for decisions we make, because that also needs to happen in a responsible society. But that sent like everyone's worthy. And that is really important. That's like so fundamental. But yeah, so many people don't believe that.
Well, and that's something we talk a lot about on the podcast. Like if that was the belief, the collective belief, we probably wouldn't be having billions of dollars on the diet industry, or someone like Donald Trump probably would not be like the president, right? So it's like, what would be what is going on systemically to keep that narrative in the collective? Because I think more people are willing to buy and to go outside of themselves and to believe in someone outside of themselves if they feel unworthy than they do if they feel worthy, right? So like that perpetuation on a thing like dating, right? Exactly what you're saying. If I believe I'm not worthy, then I'm more likely to use these tools or these rules or go outside of myself and not check in and be honest about how I'm feeling about this person or this relationship. And so I think, you're exactly right. I think from every inch of our culture, that belief has a big impact.
It does. And I think I'm curious, Jane, how do you deal with the pushback?
Well, I used to do this sort of motivational interviewing, which for those of you who aren't therapists and don't know, it's where you try and get your client to say the thing that you already want them to say. Instead, like you're trying to get them to see the rationale of something on their own, or to connect with, what they value. So they make different choices. I would say like, all right, so let's look at the people in your life. Like, do you believe that this person is worthy even when they're not working, or this person, this person who's unhoused is worthy? And that blew up in my face because a lot of people were extending the feeling of I'm not good unless I work, or I'm not good unless I'm productive, or fill in the blank, right? Have a baby, have a house, have a relationship. So they were actually interestingly saying like, no, I don't actually think that person is of much value to society. So it sort of depends on the person. For all of my clients, I will say to them, I am going to sit over here and hold for you. Like, you can't convince me otherwise about this. Like, I will always hold that you're worthy and you deserve love and you're allowed to make mistakes and you don't have to earn your place here on this planet. So I always hold that for them. And then it's usually a lot of trauma work and a lot of like family of origin work around like, okay, that's cool. You have this belief system that you think that you developed out of nowhere, that you think is yours, but you actually inherited this from your trauma and your family and your religion and your culture and your society. So I'm really interested in giving people options and being very clear about where our stories come from, which is almost never like authentically from ourselves, especially at the beginning, right? Like we're all, once you've done a little bit of work and some reflecting, you can do a little bit more to claim your own story and your own truth. But these are inherited stories, right?
Well, my thing I always tell my clients is like, what about a baby? They're the most pathetic, desperate, do not offer anything to the world, right? But we love and care for them more than anything, right? And so that's your evidence that it is just conditioned and programmed, because no one looks at a baby and says, they're not worthy. They're not, adding anything. Everyone finds them like lovable and endearing. And so there you go, right? There's the proof.
I use kids a lot as an example of like, tell me a kid you care about in your life. Okay. Let's look at that person. Are you going to be like, hey, you're a fucking loser
Yeah.
because you're not working?
Yeah.
No, that sounds ridiculous, right?
Mhm.
It's just as ridiculous to say that to yourself. I use kids a lot, but I think, sort of Jane, what you're talking about is like, I'm going to hold that for you and I will give that back to you when you're able to hold it. And let's look at why you can't hold it. And like, doing all that trauma work. I think I don't love genograms. I like exploring history. I do. Like, I love, like, I'm, a marriage and family therapist, like systems, that's my jam. But like genograms just don't really hold me in that way. But I can see when like we're talking about this, doing genograms is really helpful for that reason. And I think it's because I see patterns quite quickly and quite very easily. I'm like, connect that dot. And I keep having to be like, and that information isn't really great unless they see it. So they need to see that and they have to connect those dots for themselves where, and I think a genogram is a great way to like, let's look at these, let's look at these themes, let's look at these patterns and how they've been sort of inherited and passed down.
And a genogram, for those of you who don't know, is like, no, that's okay. I know therapists are just like, we're like in our own world. So, but it's like a map of your family history and connections and all of those things, which your therapist may or may not use. It can be a great tool with a therapist or not useful or a great tool on your own. I'm kind of with you on that, Amanda. I haven't used one for a really long time, actually, but
yeah, I have to in school and I'm like, I don't. But I'm realizing because I'm like, what my resistance was because I already know. And then I was like, yes, and they don't, which is like what the point is. And like now making that switch, I'm like, okay, maybe I'll give them a little second look and give them more of a shot.
What made you go from like coach to therapist? Because I don't think we see that transition a lot. I think we see the other way, therapist to coach or coach and no therapist. So what made you do the training and go towards that?
Yeah. I had always wanted to be a therapist. I first looked into going back to grad school as soon as I had graduated my undergrad, but I just was not ready emotionally and psychologically to, going back to work. I just did not feel capable. I was like, who am I? I can't do that. I could never do that. Right. Like, so it's been a desire for a really long time, but I just didn't feel worthy of it. And then, so coaching felt like a really sort of easy way to get in there and like do what I wanted to do. And it was a natural extension. I was a yoga teacher for a very long time. I did relationship coaching after it. And I was sort of mentored by someone and then went into her style from there until I was really finding like my own, attachment theory, sort of like IFS based. And I think the more I started to learn, the more I was like, oh, I want more. And I want the structure. I want the research. I want this to be backed up. I don't just want it to be based on, this is what I know works for me. And that's sort of like the model that I was coaching under. And so I just started to see the negatives of that. And I wanted to like have that research. I wanted that knowledge. And so I was just like, I got to do it. And so I just finally made that jump of I can do this and it's going to be so much money, which my God, it's so much fucking money.
Yes, it is.
Sure is.
The student loans.
Yeah.
The student loans is intense, but it's worth it. And I have loved it. And I'm so glad that I did because I have learned so much, like so much. Being a baby therapist, especially in the beginning, it's getting like, I feel more momentum now, but in the beginning I was like, fuck, this is so different than coaching. And that has been like a huge learning curve. Like I have coaching skills. Like I think that's a strength, but I'm learning all this whole other skill set, which is really exciting. And I'm not going to forget this skill set, but it's like, that's a screwdriver and you don't always need a screwdriver. Like you need other things. So it's like giving me more tools in my tool bag. And I like the, evidence-based practice.
Do you think there's a place for coaching still? I mean, what is now that you're...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like who would you suggest coaching for?
I think that depending on where my clients are, like I will go more into coaching. So if you have been in therapy for a really long time, so you've like done the digging, you like know the shit and you're like, okay, and now how do I get to that? Like we're like putting these things into practice. I think coaching is like really good for that. And I will always now be like therapist and coach because like that's just part of me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's like a huge strength in that. So, and I use Gottman right now as like my main model for couples. I'm starting my EFT training, which I will probably be like exclusively EFT because there's just nothing better. Like we're cooking with fire because we're just in there about the attachment. We're just like so focused there. And I really love that. But with Gottman, like they are like, you're the coach, you're like coaching them on it. So it's like that, my skill set, like really applies to Gottman, which I really love. And so I think it's like a good combo. Like think that it's having that combination in a therapist is really helpful. Because, but it depends on each client, right? Like not every client needs to be coached. I think that takes time. I wasn't ready to be coached for a long time. I needed a lot of therapy. I needed to like work on the trauma. I needed to understand what that was, really look at it, really feel it. If you just jump straight to coaching, then you're not doing the deeper work. Right. And the deeper work is so necessary,
Okay. I haven't dated for 10 years. And so I'm very much out of the loop. I'm married. That's why I haven't dated for 10 years.
Yes. Congrats.
I had all sorts of, I had a long history of dating and sleeping with people and then not dating, all sorts of things. I'm super curious about these rules because like I like met my husband. I never thought about withholding sex. I just didn't ever think about that.
Good for
I
you.
had sex with my husband on the second date before we went to dinner. Like he was like, come to my house. Like, of course we're going to have sex. Right. So like the only reason we didn't have sex on our first date is because I hadn't shaved or showered. And I was like, I am disgusting. Like I don't want a person down in that area. So are these like, where are people are these like straight white people at a certain socioeconomic group? Like, is that what the rules are? Or are they like, tell me about these rules.
Yeah. Okay. I definitely think like it is certainly not the queer community who is perpetuating these, right? Like they're like, we're not going to be in some like stupid box that society has created. Like we're already saying we want to be authentic to ourselves, right? Which is like, hell yes. I definitely think it's like straight white women who are, and men, but I'm more tuned into like what women are saying. Yeah. I'm not listening to like a lot of male speakers on dating because I'm just, I don't know. No shade, but I just relate to a woman more. So I think that's definitely where I was hearing it, right? And like with what I love with what you just said of like, I slept with my husband on the second date. The only reason I didn't on the first is because I didn't want to, essentially, because sex isn't a manipulation tool.
Yeah.
We don't give it to get what we want, and we don't withhold it to get what we want. We do it because we want to. It's a connection tool. And I think these rules make it manipulative and withholding or giving based on what I want. And here's the thing. We have to look at the patriarchy a little bit, like zoom out. Yeah. Women, we have been taught to manipulate because we didn't have rights. We were second-class citizens, right? In the 70s, we were still not allowed to have our own bank account. We had to have our husband on a bank account or our father. We couldn't have a bank account on our own in the 70s. That was not that fucking long ago. So the only way that we could control our lives was by controlling the men, right? So a maladaptive thing to like really extreme circumstances. So we haven't unlearned that, right? I mean, listen, our rights as women are still in threat right now. So like that is happening, but it's a direct cause of that because in order for a woman to say, I get to do this when I want to, she needs to feel safe that she is not going to be called a slut, right? That she's not going to die, rape. Like there's so many things, right? And so I understand the fear. And like, even if those other, like the more extreme fears aren't there of like, my safety isn't in question, but like your reputation is, and that misogyny is still very real. There's a very big, huge resurgence of that going on right now. And that does play into this. I am lucky that I am very privileged that I have lived in very progressive places. And so that has been less of an issue, but that comes up in my client sessions now. I live in Portland, but I work outside of it in the surrounding areas, and it's more conservative in those surrounding areas. And so that misogyny is very present. And, men valuing women based on the amount of men they haven't slept with or have, and that value changing depending on that number. So women owning their sexuality is very new, and it's like, it's always been under attack, and it's like especially under attack right now. And so like, I get it, right? There's like real things. And we still have to look at sex is not a manipulation tool. And if we're using it that way, we need to do some work on that. And we need to make sure that the men we're going to date, if we're straight, are open-minded men who are not going to weaponize sex, right? Who are like, I care about your value as a human, not as a reflection of my own masculinity, which is more when we're getting to like the misogyny. So there's a lot at play there. Right.
Well, and that's my whole bone to pick with the whole dating rules thing, right? It's exactly what you're saying, Amanda. It's like falsely empowering women. It's like, okay, you're like saying you're empowering women by saying like, you know, how do I want to say this with my friends, even besides the sex thing, even just dating, right? Like do this, and this man will fall for you. And it's like, okay, that is being marketed as like, okay, you're a powerful woman who can get a man. But at the end of the day is like our only purpose on this earth to get a man to like us and to follow all these rules. I mean, I just went to brunch with a friend, and she was talking, and she's like, but I don't know, like all these red flags and this or that. I'm like, what do you want to do? Right? Like, what if you just did whatever the fuck you wanted to do instead of doing what all of us women are trained to do, which is worry about everyone else, what they think, our reputation, what, right? Am I going to scare this man away? I mean, it's such a bullshit thing where like, it's just anti-women again.
It is. Yeah. And it's not, I'm like, you know, I have a friend who's dating right now, and I'm always trying to, when she comes to me, I'm being like, do not center how he feels, what he thinks of you. What do you think of him, and how do you feel? So if you're telling me you're attracted to this guy, you like him, you want to go on a second date or whatever, and he didn't follow up, he didn't get your number, he didn't do something, I'm like, then you don't actually like that. It's not, oh, he doesn't like me. I'm like, no, do you like that behavior? No, that doesn't work for you. And like, we need to center that more. We need to look at that more. We need to focus on that more, is what do I think and how do I feel? Not, can I get this approval? Right. Which we have been conditioned to do in society. Right. That has also been survival for us, like for eons. So like, that's some generational trauma that we're working through. And I think it's really important to become aware of that so that you can work out of it. If you're not aware of it, you're just going to be under it. And we need to understand that that's happening so that we can be like, yes, I need to look at, does this work for me? Do I like this? And also very much like, I always remind people, I'm like, listen, secure attachment does not mean you're fucking perfect. It does not mean I go on one date and I determine whether I like this person or not, and then it's my husband, and then secure attachment means you trust yourself to explore if something feels worthwhile exploring. So that means you might go on 4 dates with someone and be like, they don't want a relationship, and so bummer. I'm so fucking bummed about that. And so, damn, I'm really sad. And I'm going to go on another date with him because I just really like him, and then be like, ugh, we can't do this anymore. I'm so sorry. Or it might be you date someone for, a year, and you're like, I'm realizing I don't really like him. I gotta, or like whatever. Or they break up with you, whatever. Like, it's exploring things. It's not perfection. Yeah, totally. It's not getting it right. It's not a destination. It's not a box to check off. Right? Yep. It is not going, okay, I've done the thing. Now I'm good and I'll have a perfect life, and like, I'll never worry again, or I'll never have fear again, or I'll never feel bad again. The human condition is feeling. Sorry to break it to everyone. Like, we're never going to help you not feel. We're going to help you feel more. Yeah. Right. And recognize that the feelings aren't the things that you need to run away from, and they don't cause suffering. So it's really removing that of like, I need to get it right. The securest thing to do is let yourself explore and be honest about what's going on in that. Like, I want to go out with this guy again. Do it. Explore it. Okay. What's going on there? Like, and then be honest about what you're finding.
I love that. Like, secure attachment is not about getting it right and following the rules and checking the box. Secure attachment is trusting yourself enough to give yourself permission to try stuff on, to explore it, to see how it feels. I mean, I think that's a really beautiful way of putting it, especially for people who are dating, right? Like, what can secure attachment look like in a dating experience, in a dating relationship?
Right. And that it looks like you're honest. So
yeah.
with my husband, I was like, what do you want? I want a committed long-term relationship. I'm looking for my like life partner. What do you want? And he gave me like a paragraph and I was like, I don't understand what that means. What do you want? And he was like, okay, I want a relationship. And I was like, great, we can proceed. And I got to the point where I was like, if you're like, oh, I don't know, I was like, then not for me, goodbye. Because I was like, I no longer feel sad or worried or scared that like, I want this. This is what I want. And if you don't want that, I'm so happy for you. Then I'm just not going to, I don't want to date right now just to date. There was times in my life where I did, and that was really fun. I'm really happy for that time, but that isn't now. I know what I want. You know, I was 37. I was like really know who I am and what works for me and what doesn't. And I am not going to apologize for that. And that's going to scare some people off. Good.
Yeah.
I don't want you if you're scared of that.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I met my husband, he was like, sick. I love that you know what you want and you're not apologizing about it. Like that was such a turn on for him. But I had to authentically get there too. I wasn't doing that from a place of like, doing this is going to attract you.
Totally.
Right. I wasn't playing a game. It was, this is genuinely how I feel. I was also very open with feelings. Like I never had to ask because he always let me know. Right. Like when it's a relationship that's going to go the distance, you're never worried. You're never like, oh, what are we? Like, you know, because you guys are communicating. It's very obvious. You're being open and direct and honest with each other. And like, you're having clear communication. But I was never worried about being myself, right? It was like, this is what I want. And here's how I feel about it. And like, cool. And I was being met that way. But when you're, you know, I want a relationship, but I like can't say that. And so I need to wait. And like, can I? And then on this date, maybe I can. We're already in trouble. Right? You have to be your full self and you have to accept that so that someone else can be like, yeah. Right. But if like you won't accept it, you can't wait for someone else to do it for you. That's your job. That's your work.
Totally.
Right. Like when I'm working with couples and we're like, you know, I work with high conflict couples. And so there's a lot of time where I'm like, yes. And what is your piece of this? You're feeling insecure. So like, what is your responsibility? Right. Like, your responsibility is filling your cup so that your relationship is the overflow of that. If you're saying, I'm half empty, fill the rest up, please, you are never going to be satisfied. And there's no lonelier feeling to me than being in a relationship and going, why is this not satisfying? Because I wasn't doing the work to make it satisfying for myself.
And I might add to piggyback on kind of what you both were just exploring. These are like aspirational goals, right? Like I think that my cup's not always full. And sometimes I ask my husband to fill it for me, and that's not fair to him. So when your therapist is like, you got to fill yourself up, or you got to feel good about yourself, or you need self-love, I think that someone stepping on that path and being on that journey is great, right? Because I think it's easy to interpret like, well, I'm not securely attached, so I can't have healthy relationships. Like that's,
no, it's always in process.
Always in process. And so I think I also see my clients holding themselves back. Where like, I have so much work to do, or I haven't figured this out, or I'm not here yet. I see clients already in relationships who have done not very much work and think everything is hopeless, you know? So I think I like that. Like, I like the shades of gray. And I like, you know, we had somebody on who said like, we all have some of all of these attachment styles, you know, like there's 100%. Not an arrival place where you can say I'm securely attached. And I think that's like pop lingo where you don't have a therapist explaining to you like, sometimes you're going to feel anxious and avoidant and all of those pieces. Right. And like, great.
Yeah.
I think healing is when you go, I'm feeling this and this is coming up for me. And I can now talk about it. Right. I think you can like see your own healing in that place. Like that doesn't mean that I don't ever get anxious. Of course I do. Right. I've had plenty of moments in my relationship where I was really obsessed in the beginning with our honeymoon phase. And I was like, if our honeymoon phase is over, we are dead. And what I had to like, so I was like putting a lot of pressure on us to be in the honeymoon phase. And my husband was like, whoa, like what is happening? I'm so confused. You're acting like we're not okay. And like, I feel okay. And I'm like really confused with that. And what I had to look at was, why is this coming up for me? Because I don't trust that I'm going to be able to like really commit if this isn't new and exciting and like, you know, the like ups and downs and like this is steady. And I've had some commitment issues in my past, right? I've left relationships when they were good and steady because I was bored. And I had to be like, yes, that is in our past. And I forgive us for that. And I understand where that comes from, why we did that. And also we got to acknowledge all the work we've done and that we're not there anymore. Right. I can like let that go now because I looked at what it was about for me. So I think like healing is just, you're able to like see and look and like go like, yeah, let's like look in there and talk about it. And so I was able to be like, okay, so you know why I'm so obsessed with our honeymoon phase is because of this. Yeah. And my husband was able to be like, okay, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I understand. And like, what do you need? And whatever. And we work through it. But yeah, it'll come up, right? Like relationships are always going to poke. That's what they're here for. They're here to like, there's such a growth, right? An area of growth. And that's not just romantic. Friendships, right? Friendships also poke and there's so much growth there too. And that will always happen. That will never not happen. And so it's being aware and okay with that. Yeah, and exploring 100%. It at the end of the day.
And I think that, I mean, it goes back to what we kind of started this conversation, the dating rules, the do this, the look for these red flags, this should be present, like literally takes that exploration away from people, right? It like literally turns it off. So you don't get to explore. You don't have to explore. You just follow this formula, or you look for these green flags or look for these red flags, but you're not like really tuning into yourself, you know?
Yeah, even with attachment, Jane, like what you said of, you know, everyone has a little bit of attachment. What I started to notice as that became more popular in like the zeitgeist is then people get so attached to the label and like, no, I'm this, I'm this. Yeah, and the way that I've described it is like, if you're going to use something, use it as a ladder to get out of the hole in your brain, not as like a little cover hole where you hide under. And if it's going against you, don't use the label because that's not helping you. And no one is like stuck in one piece. Like I think the beauty of being a human is we have this ability. We are malleable, right? Our brains are plastic. They are completely capable of change and evolution, which is the hard and wonderful part about being a human. And so if I started to like be like, let's not even talk about attachment like that, because you're stuck there. So like, let's rewind. Right?
Yeah.
Let's get underneath that because now that word is a barrier to you.
I think so many.
And we want to remove that barrier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think any word, any diagnosis, anything can be a barrier.
Label.
I do too.
Yeah.
To a person. And I remind my clients, like the DSM, which is the book that the therapists use that says like, if your client presents this way, then they have this disorder or this, you know, personality, whatever, blah, blah, blah. It changes all the time. So it is a made up. So an attachment is also made up. It helps us organize, but everything, like nothing is that black and white, right? Including like anxiety disorder, depression, borderline personality disorder. Like they help us organize and talk to each other. They help us give good treatment to our clients. They help us figure out what like workarounds with medications, all of these pieces. So yeah, if something's feeling like a barrier or scary, or somebody said to you, you're this way, you can just let it go. But also if you're like, oh my God, I mean, I've had clients who are like, God, it makes sense now. Like, oh yeah, anxious attachment. I can totally relate to that. I just thought I was deficient in some way. And now I can see that there's a term for it and a bunch of people identify with it. So it's, you know, I think it's really like, what is most useful to you? What is in your service, right? What is in your best interest in terms of these kind of things?
I think that you have to use it as such. Like a label of anxious attachment was really helpful for me when I was like really deep in that. Or I always like to say, like for me, when I was getting sober, and I went to an AA meeting, I was so resistant to going. And then when I went to one and I was like, oh, I'm an alcoholic. The freedom I fucking felt was like, oh my God, okay. I have a name for this thing that I've been struggling with and that I didn't know what to do with. And now it has a box. And so now I can go, here's a box. Here's what I'm going to do with that box. I'm going to unpack that box. I'm going to break that box down. Right. And for some people, they're like, that doesn't work for me. And I'm like, yeah, then don't use it. Don't use that label if it doesn't work for you. But if we are going to use a label, let's make sure that that's giving us freedom, right? Of like, this is a ladder that I'm going to climb out of. This is not right away, right? It's not going to be like, oh, I'm better, woo! But that it's going to be the thing that is like helping us get there. And if it's not, then we need to lose that label because then it's just a barrier that we're putting in front of ourselves that we can remove.
You've been listening to Are We Happy Yet? A Green Roof Studios production.
This episode was recorded and produced by Hannah Buzzo and Jane Thatcher Hahn.
If you liked what you heard, rate, review, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Every review on Apple or Spotify helps us grow and redefine what it means to be well in an unwell world.
Thanks for listening. Try to stay happy out there.